Thank you, Chair. We're live on YouTube, so I'll hand over to you to start the meeting.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome to East Devon District Council's briefing meeting with South West Water for members of the Scrutiny Committee, councillors and the public. I am your Chair, Councillor Jamie Kemp. I would also like to welcome anybody watching via the live streaming. As this is a briefing meeting, our Democratic Services officers will make a note of those councillors present. We move to agenda item 1, please, and apologies.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Mike Allen, Councillor Jess Bailey, Councillor Sam Hawkins and Councillor Tony Woodward.
Sorry, we can't hear anybody. Sorry to interrupt you.
Oh.
We could hear you just now, but we now can't hear you.
Everything looks all right at our end, because you're showing on our screen, on my screen, as you've got audio connection. And we can hear you. So the only thing I can suggest is that actually you leave and come back into the meeting.
That's the volume.
We can hear you perfectly well.
We can hear you now.
Lovely.
Just can't get the camera work.
Fantastic. Hand back to you, Chair. We seem to be okay now.
Brilliant. Thank you. Before we move on to agenda item 2, please could I have a volunteer from committee to stand in as Vice Chair, just in case I have any technical difficulties. Please raise your hand and let me know. Anybody? No Vice Chair? Okay. Well, hopefully the internet won't break, so we'll carry on. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. As we are meeting with South West Water today, may I suggest that the minutes note that all members have an equal interest as customers of South West Water. If any member has any other declarations to make, please could you state what it is by raising your electronic hand now. I can see no hands raised. Move on. Agenda item 3. Firstly, I would like to welcome Mr. Ian Lake, Head of Solution Development and Technical Performance at Water. Thank you for attending today. We very much hope that this meeting continues a constructive dialogue between the Council and South West Water, which started when Mr. Alan Burrows attended a meeting in March of this year and continued yesterday when we considered beach and river quality. Mr. Lake has joined us today to discuss a planning issue. To prepare for this meeting, councillors were asked to submit any questions, but I understand that no questions were submitted to Mr. Lake. As Mr. Lake is available until 11:30, I will aim to structure the meeting to ensure that all questions are put, although it may be necessary for answers to be provided following the meeting. We'll move on to agenda item 4 and the presentation. So I'll hand over to Mr. Lake to begin. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. As Chair said, my name is Ian Lake. I've actually got 3 colleagues with me today. I'm not quite sure what's happening with the technology, but we might need to move things around in a minute. So with me today are David Hardy. So David is our Strategic Wastewater Network Asset Manager. Alison Tregale, who is our Developer Relationship Manager, and Helen Steeve, who's our Pre-Development Lead. So I'm actually in a minute going to hand over to the 3 of them to run through a presentation. So we'll share a presentation with you in a minute. We obviously picked up from your liaison with Nick in our office, I think, some of the themes that you wanted to cover. So hopefully we've covered most of those in the presentation, but obviously we will welcome any questions that anybody's got on that basis. I think just before I hand over to my colleagues, I would just like to thank you for the opportunity to come along today. It's been, it's a really great opportunity, I think, for us to continue to work on, the relationship between our organisations. As we all appreciate, there are some challenges at the present time, things like climate change, and some of the other challenges that we've got at the minute are obviously challenging us all at the present time. And therefore, I do think a continuation of the relationship is essential for us in terms of making sure that we can continue going forward, and hopefully we can support what you need. And similarly, there are some things I think that you perhaps can support us with. So I think without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to my colleagues. As I say, I will be here for the duration of the meeting, and I certainly will be here for any questions. We're going to see if we can get the technology. We're going to share a presentation, so please bear with us just a minute. we're hoping you can see the presentation.
Yes, we can, thank you.
Fantastic, thank you.
Right.
Well done.
Okay, so what we plan to cover today is competition in the water market, the legislation that South West Water work under for new development sites, our processes, the current challenges we have, particularly some details on Cranbrook, our drainage and wastewater management plans and how yourselves could help us in this proposal. I can't see any hands up during the presentation, so please stop me if you've got any questions, okay? So, who are we? Now, South West Water is a regional statutory undertaker and we're governed by the Water Act of 1989 and the Water Industry Act of 1991. We manage water resources, build and maintain appointed water networks, treat wastewater, deal with sludge, and also have a household and a non-household account management in play. There are reasons why I'm explaining this, and we'll go on to it in a minute and you'll see. So the water market has changed over the last number of years and a lot of other things have come into play, and it's not just South West Water as a regional statutory undertaker anymore. Particularly in the developer world. Developer world now has something that's called a NAV, which is a new appointed a variation, and I'll go on and explain more about that in a minute. But they also, developers have, you will hear talks about self-lay providers and drainage contractors in the market as well. So there are different things to play in the water market now than there was a number of years ago. And this is all about driving competition and giving developers choice. So when we talk about developers having choice, developers have a number of choices out there. They have a choice of who constructs the asset. So from a clean water point of view, they can use what's called a self-lay provider. And there are more and more of those companies setting up and working in the Southwest. They have a ground worker, and you'll traditionally understand those and see those on development sites, and they are there to construct the roads, but they also construct the wastewater. And they also, developers have an option to come to us as a water undertaker to do it. The more changing world out there is actually who is adopting that asset. And this has seen a big change over the last 6 to 12 months, although legislation has been there for a number of years. The world is changing and has already changed in the East Devon world. So developers can choose to come to South West Water to adopt. They can go to a NAV to adopt that asset, or they can leave it private. So you're probably thinking, what is a NAV? I suspect is the question you're going to thinking about. So what is a NAV? Now, I'm particularly explaining to you what a NAV is because you have one in Goodmore's Farm in Exmouth. And what it is another water company. So they are a statutory undertaker who have chosen to come in and serve an area of land which is not currently served by South West Water. They have obtained a licence from Ofwat and they have engaged with those developers to serve their site. In relation to Goodmore's Farm, ultimately that connection goes back to our network, and we have given the NAV itself a connection to it. But I think it's important to remember this is now another water company coming into our area and actually being responsible for the water mains and sewers in that area. Now, this is one that's live in East Devon currently. We've currently got circa 73 applications going through for NAVs in our area at the moment. So it's something that it's a growing thing, and I think it's important for you guys to understand that it's not just us anymore as a water undertaker. There will be others now. The one at Goodmore's Farm is called Integrated Water Networks, or shortened to IWNL. The other one you might see around is ICOSA. So Those are the two that are currently in play in our area at the moment, but there are others out there, and over the coming years you will probably see more. So it is a developer's choice to go to that now, not South West Water's choice. So that is, developer can choose who to adopt their asset. So I know I'm emphasising it, but I think that's a really important thing to bear in mind, is developers can choose to come to us or a NAV now. Okay, so what are our duties? Now, as a water undertaker, we are responsible for providing clean water for drinking purposes, but we're also responsible for effectively draining properties. So we have two obligations that we're required to do. As part of this, we're governed by lots of pieces of legislation, and I won't go into great detail on it, but there are lots of pieces of legislation which means we have to do certain things by certain timescales. But the fundamental is we are required to provide clean water and drain properties, and to extend our network as those customers request. Now, the big one. So when a developer looks to develop their site, they have a right to connect to the nearest size of water main or sewer of similar size or bigger. Now, this was confirmed in case law back in 2009. And what it means is a developer has an absolute right to choose their point of connection on our network. And as an undertaker, we cannot refuse them permission to connect to our network, even where the sewer or water main will be overloaded by additional discharge. So this is a fundamental thing, and a lot of people think that we're in control of where a developer connects. We're not. We will work with them and help them and support them, but we're not in control of where they connect. And it's up to us as statutory undertaker to make sure that any additional discharge that's created by that developer, we deal with in our network and upgrade that network suitably to cater for it.
I'm really sorry to interject. Are the slides moving on? Because we can only see the first slide. I don't know if you'd actually progress the slides. If you go into the top, what I can see on my screen is if you click slideshow from the beginning, then they'll be able to move on, because we can only literally see your very first slide. I'm sorry to interrupt.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah, okay, we're trying to sort out, we're actually on slide 8, so we'll try and recover our position.
Yeah.
I think it all depends which screen you're sharing. I think if you go back to share screen, you may find that you're sharing the wrong screen.
Right, okay.
Just a possibility.
I'm going to end the slideshow and try again.
If you just click on the very top left-hand corner from the beginning, the box in the toolbar at the top from the beginning, and it's got a green arrow, then that should bring up the whole slideshow right from the start, and then you can just progress through the slides.
Yeah, we think we've done that.
Oh.
So
I'm afraid we haven't seen any of them.
Is that moved on at all at your end now?
Well, it's moved on down the left-hand side.
So you're not showing, I think you're showing your screen now. So can you see an image with two presentation slides on it?
Yes, we're on slide 8 on the left-hand side of our screens now, a developer's right to connect. if people are happy to view that, perhaps you could share the presentation with us afterwards as well, so that we can
we'll certainly do that. It's just been a little bit easy to walk through the presentation with you to obviously to sort of follow the gist. Otherwise, it's quite a dry discussion, isn't it? Did you want to unplug yourself from the main screen? I'll just do it through your laptop.
Yeah.
Because I think you have already.
Is that moving on for you?
We can see slide 3 now.
It's not moving, no. We're on slide 3, yeah.
Have you got a different slide now?
No, it
Nope.
doesn't seem to be moving on at our end. We can see your sort of your initial PowerPoint page when the slideshow opens, if you see what I mean, as opposed to
Right. Okay.
yeah, now it's scrolling down the left hand side.
Because I'm clicking from the beginning. No. How else do?
Can I suggest if we get the slide up like you had it, with where we can see the two slides side by side,
Yeah,
at least the left hand.
Yeah.
Sarah, I wonder if it's worth it being sent to me, and I'll try and put it up in the background.
That's what I was going to suggest.
Yeah.
It might be worth just sending it to one of our staff, see if they can get it to work.
Send it to myself, S. Howell at eastdevon.gov.uk. And I'll try and put it on for you.
Right, 2 seconds.
It keeps going up as well.
I've just sent that on its merry way to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is it all right to ask while we're waiting?
Yes.
Simple question. The outside separate bodies, or whatever you call them, the competition, are they just controlling the sewers themselves, or South West Water still overall control of the processing plant itself?
So it does depend. So some NABs, as we're calling them, can actually create their own sewage treatment works if they want to, and discharge totally to that themselves. So be in total control. The current one you have in East Devon is actually discharging to our network. So it's the works we're still in control of.
Thanks.
I haven't actually received anything yet by email.
Hang on.
Eleanor, your hand is raised for a question, or?
I have got a question, actually. I don't know whether it's a very good time to ask it while they're grappling with technology, though.
Please carry on. We can answer. We'll multitask.
Okay,
Yeah.
so my question is this. So I'm probably being very simplistic, but from my point of view, South West Water has got a monopoly on bringing us clean drinking water and taking away dirty water that needs cleaning across the entire area, yes? So what you're talking to us about at the moment seems to be the delivery of the infrastructure surrounding new developments. And to be honest, it doesn't really matter to the consumer who is actually building the infrastructure, as long as they get clean water coming into their house and get their dirty water taken away and treated properly, not discharged into nature. So my question really, I suppose, since I sit on strategic planning, is do you have a body that is addressing large planning applications coming forwards with a view to up rating the size of your processing power to cope with these large developments coming forwards? Because these things are planned 15 years in advance. So I would hope that would be enough time for you to plan the infrastructure to cope with the development. But it seems that at the moment you're almost caught short by developments plugging into your network, which just seems like it's the wrong way around, really, from a planning perspective.
So I think, so I'll jump in there just while the guys are trying to sort out the link. So we will cover that in a bit later in the presentation in terms of what we do from a strategic level. So Alison is talking at the moment around sort of the rules by which we need to operate, and just sharing, if you like, I think some of the movements that potentially we're going to see more and more, I think, over the coming years. David will pick up that in terms of sort of our more strategic wastewater and particularly wastewater, but our drinking water is exactly the same. You're absolutely right in terms of the timeline for some of these developments, and as you say, some of the developments are long planned, and we're very aware of them when we do build those into our asset plans, both in terms of capacity specifically for the new development, and also in respect, also for example, if we were looking to do some investment at one of our treatment plants, we would at that point always consider anything that's coming forward in the network over the coming years to build in what we know as headroom within those assets, so that we've got treatment capacity within those assets in readiness for them to come on board. What we do sometimes have, though, is in the pace at which those developments come forward. So some of the large strategic developments, they're understood. Some of the more strategic sort of infill or sort of more tactical infill type developments, sometimes the timing around on which they're going to come forward is a little less clear, and therefore we're always trying to work in with our developers, and we'll talk about that in a minute, around particularly some of the larger developers, our sort of what we term as our key developer relationships, to make sure that we understand what their plans are coming forward and when they're actually, so whilst they're being in a strategic plan, when they actually come forward in terms of the year, so we can try and line up our expenditure with those needs.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So, I mean, from the point of view of the infrastructure, then there's no suggestion that the infrastructure is being built to a substandard quality. It's just being delivered by other water companies who are presumably working to the same rules.
Yeah. So they will. So we within the water industry have got some very clear rules in respect of the standards by which we need to undertake those assets. On what we know as these NAV sites, they will operate themselves. They will for everything on that site in terms of the operation, and therefore, the need for them to be aligned in terms of quality is there, because arguably they will be responsible for those pipes forever and a day, exactly the same as the water company is currently, and therefore, obviously, in terms of the long-term life of those assets. I think what we could see going forward, and I think Alison was trying to explain this just now, is a scenario where on some of the very large developments that we have, we could get a NAV come onto those sites and actually build a brand new treatment plant, for argument's sake. Therefore, South West Water wouldn't be part of that equation at all, because all of the sewers on the site would drain to the treatment plant owned by the NAV, and therefore it would be a separate entity in itself, as it were. We don't have any of those at the moment, but it is certainly a possibility that could happen going forward.
But there's no suggestion, is there, that any of this infrastructure is of a worse quality? So it doesn't necessarily affect your day-to-day running, your day-to-day operation.
It shouldn't impact our day-to-day running at all. So they will have a connection to our network. The overarching networks, which across the whole of the localities, it is ours, and know that what's happening on the individual NAV sites shouldn't impact our activities.
Okay, thank you.
I see we're back up and running now.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
thank you.
Thank you.
Could you just confirm which slide you want me to be on?
Yeah,
Of course.
keep going.
Keep going. Right.
No. Literally, I was just talking about developers. So that's that one, please.
Okay.
So we were just talking about developers' right to connect. So the question is, who pays for what?
Yeah.
I think that's a big the big question here. So what you see on the slide there in dark green and shaded in dark green is, so this is a typical, sorry, I'll rewind. This is a typical housing site. In the dark green is the proposed new development. You'll see a straight line going north, which is to an existing road or network. And then you'll see some light green on the right and a salmon colour to the north on the drawing. So in relation to the dark green, this is the developer funds this activity directly themselves. So this is the provision of on-site drainage, on-site water mains, on-site connections, and the connection to our nearest public sewer or water main is what the developer does and funds directly. As part of that, the developer will also pay us what's called an infrastructure charge. Now, this is a charge that's levied on all properties that connect for the first time to our network. And this allows us to upgrade our assets to cater for that going forward. So this might be an increase in pumping station, bigger size pipes. So that funding is paid to us by the developer and allows us to look at those future assets that are downstream of their site and make sure they're suitably sized to deal with that work. So that's the bit in the light green on the slide. Then you've got the bit in the salmony colour to the north there. Now that is our treatment works. So that is up to South West Water to totally fund. It's not funded by developers. So that to upgrade anything that's needed at our treatment works or our water treatment works. So fundamentally, the developer pays directly for their on-site drainage and connecting it to our network. Any pumping stations or upsizing of pipe work between the site and the treatment works, the developer pays South West Water an infrastructure charge to do. And then the upgrades at the sewage treatment works, water treatment works, rests with South West Water to do.
But I think it's important to stress when we talk about the infrastructure charge is a standard charge per property which gets paid to the water company. It is not site specific. So it isn't the case of saying a particular development, for argument's sake, has to have £1 million worth of off-site reinforcement work done in the network, and therefore the developer pays us £1 million. They pay us a standard charge which goes into our effectively investment pot for developments across the whole region. So they aren't specific to locality. They are a general charge which we then need to use across the whole of the region. To make sure that we are doing what we need to do around ensuring that our assets, our water mains and our network, our sewer networks continue to operate effectively, obviously protecting the environment and making sure that customers get the service that they should expect.
Come on, Jamie.
Okay, if there's no questions on charges, shall we move on?
Could I come in, Chair, please?
Yeah.
Thank you. First of all, I should declare an interest. I had a lot of involvement with South West Water for many years. I was on their special assistance fund as well at the time, which is now, I think, Sure Start, which has been given to citizens of Clyde. I just wondered about billing. 2/3 of customers' bill is foul and surface water drainage. I just wondered how that would work out if South West Water is going to do the processing of that foul and surface water. How does the bill stack up as far as the customer is concerned? And who, if South West Water is doing all this processing, and yet it's the responsibility of whatever water company it is, I just don't understand how the whole thing works. Could somebody explain that?
Yeah, sorry, we should have probably explained. Sorry, that's a remiss on us in terms of explaining that. So if we've got a NAV, so if we've got a development of Goodmore Farm, for example, in Exmouth, that is effectively, that site is managed by another water company. So it's not managed by them, and the customers on that estate will not be South West Water customers. However, the NAV body there pays South West Water some of those charges, so they pay us a charge for that treatment price. So we still get income from the NAV for what we did as wholesale charges. So that's exactly the cost that you're talking about. You know, our costs to treat water and our costs to treat wastewater effectively, that we will receive charges from the NAV. So effectively, they will pay us a proportion of the charges that they're taking from their customers on site in order to support those treatment processes.
So I think it's also, to be clear, is as part of Ofwat's awarding the licence to the NAV, they're very clear that the end customer, i.e. yourselves, should not be any worse off by going to the NAV.
It's almost like a form of nationalisation, except it's private.
Yeah, I mean, the idea behind it is the regulators are very keen to see competition in the market. So they're very keen to try and give choice where they can. So that's the whole basis to it. And the regulators had a strategy for some time around trying to increase the competition within the water market. So and at the moment, sort of non-household customers, so commercial customers, can choose their water supplier. So they don't have to come with South West Water. They can choose their water supplier. At the moment, at domestic level, at household level, there is no choice. But well, direction of travel may well be that in due time that choice is there. But that will be down to the regulator to achieve. What they're trying to do, as I say, is they're trying to introduce the competition element into the water industry, which as somebody mentioned quite rightly earlier, has been a monopoly for the water companies for some time, the areas in which they operate.
Yeah, it's taken over 30 years to get here.
Can I just remind members, please, to, if we can, wait until the end of the presentation before asking questions, only as we've got limited time today, and obviously like them to get through the presentation. Thank you. So if I could go back to yourselves with the presentation.
Thank you.
So hello, I'm Helen Steed and I am the pre-development lead that sits within Developer Services. So I'm here to talk to you about what my team do when it comes to things pre-development and planning, etc. So the first way that we are interacting with developers is through our pre-development application forms that we have for point of connection inquiries. So a point of connection inquiry is basically a desktop study that estimates the costs involved for the developer in providing the site that they're proposing with both clean and waste services. We also price for the diversions of public assets if they fall within the vicinity of their proposal. This is used by many developers and also homeowners who are looking to extend their property, and their searches has flagged up that there's a public asset. And they're wanting to know the costs before maybe they apply for planning permission or engage with the builder. So it gives them a real insight of the predicted costs involved for sorting out their site. At this stage, we also begin the discussion with developers on how they are planning to handle their surface water. So surface water, as you know, is a big thing. We want it to be treated as naturally and as close to source as possible. So we find that those early engagements with the developers, especially through the point of connection process, means that we can hopefully get something in place prior to planning, which means that the surface water will be handled not via our network, fingers crossed.
Should we get some?
Oh,
So you'll need to do the slide, not here.
Yeah.
oh yes, sir, sorry, can you click the slide for me? I've got some things that should whiz in. Thank you. So yes, so as I said, we deal with surface water and foul and clean at pre-development stage. So obviously with the surface water, we look to have the SUDS hierarchy adhered to as much as possible, which is basically, hopefully, the surface water going back to the ground, if not going to a water body or a ditch nearby, surface water sewer, or ultimately back to us if there are no viable options. So if you can click again for me. Thank you. So again, at planning, if we haven't spoken to the developer at pre-development stage, they see it at planning. So we, as you are aware, are not a statutory consultee. So my team manually pull up planning applications submitted weekly by all the councils in our area. And to give you an idea, from April 2021 to March 2022, my team reviewed 27,000 planning applications. So we look at any proposal that may be affecting our assets, be that large developments, extensions, sheds, signposts, flagpoles, anything that's going to be constructed near potential, our public asset we would like to know about. So we use our mapping system, which is called StruMap, and that shows where our public assets are. And we review them, and if they're going to be within the required easement of our asset, we write to obviously yourselves or the councils, and also to the individual, so the agent or the applicant. We let them know of the protective measures required and ensure that the proposed surface water is discharged in the most appropriate way. So again, we want to have that conversation really early on, pre-planning, at planning permission stage, to make it really clear of what South West Water's requirements are, and just begin that dialogue with the developer. Now, when we have a development that's over 10 dwellings, we run it through what we call our supply and demand planning tool. So this is a custom built program that we did that basically pulls data that we have on the surrounding network of the proposal. We add the load that this proposed development would add to our network, and we run the simulation, and it flags us almost like a traffic light system of if there may be any issue from the proposed site down to our treatment works. Now, if it flags up anything in the catchment area as potentially being an issue, we then pass that on to our asset management team, who then start reviewing. And if we can click the slide again, it should start going. Let's go. So we're now at the asset management stage. We work with them, let them know that this proposal is at planning and the information that the supply and demand planning tool has flagged up. We also do that for our clean water network. So we don't, in my team, run the tool for the clean water network, but we liaise with our drinking water services modelling team, who take that information and run their own model, which again would flag up any issues we could anticipate with that proposal being added to our clean water network. So we are allowed to impose some timescales if it does flag up that there is an issue on the network. The maximum time scale we can add is 18 months, but we also do try and work with the developer where possible if they need to connect earlier. So if we believe the network could accommodate 10% of the proposal, for example, while the build is happening, we will work with them to allow those smaller connections whilst any network reinforcements is going on in the background. And then if you can click again for me, please. There you go. So once we've kind of done all of that, obviously the developer is then looking to come to us to make an application to requisition the site for clean or waste. So the application is received, it goes to our delivery team within developer services, and then they come and speak to my team and double check anything that's been said at pre-planning stage, at planning stage, and if anything is flagged up on our network, just to ensure that the site is being given, they're getting all the information prior to the application being received, and they work with that to make sure that it's carried out. And that, in summary, is what my team do in pre-development. Any questions?
We'll keep going.
Keep going.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, can you put next slide, please? So our current challenges. So in 2020, the regulator implemented something called Codes for Adoption. This replaced, some of you might have heard the word sewage for adoption historically. So this is a national standard which developers can choose to sign up to if they want their water mains or sewers adopted by the undertaker. So this is a choice again by developers. So if they want it adopted, they have to comply to these standards out there. Now, with these standards brought for the first time adoption of SUDs. South West Water prior to this had not adopted SUDs, and it was something new to us and to the majority of the industry. To allow this to happen, we've arranged for training for our staff, and we've also arranged training for developers out there so that they understand what they're needing to submit to us to have their SUDs adopted. So as part of this, again, we are pushing the SUDs hierarchy. This is really key to us. It's really key to get the surface water going back to as close to the ground as we can, back to streams, etc. Although a developer has a right to connect to a combined sewer, it's a very last resort and something we would only want to do if the developer has provided us all the evidence to prove that the other options are not viable. And there is a set list of requirements for that they have to provide. So, but we will be constantly pushing this SUDs hierarchy, as Helen said just now. The other challenge for us is obviously making sure developers have separate foul and surface water systems. They all propose it, but we all know during construction that challenges can be had, and surface water, if not properly managed, can end up in the foul network. So it's down to good developer management of their foul and surface water during construction to make sure that they are adhering to that for new sites. Obviously, we can inspect and check those sites that are coming to South West Water for adoption, but developers always have the opportunity and the right for that system to remain private. In those situations, we cannot check what's going on their site, and it will be up to building control to deal with that. So next slide, please. So I think you particularly wanted to talk about Cranbrook. So in relation to Cranbrook, both myself and Ian have been with the Cranbrook development since the start. We have worked with the consortium to come to an agreement of where they can connect and what upgrades in our assets that we needed to do to facilitate that. Now, this has been an ongoing challenge for everybody, and we are now starting to see some good work by the consortium on site. Now, they have, as you're aware, built out a lot of houses out there already. They've entered into legal agreements with South West Water to get their assets adopted, and we're currently working with them to actually get them vested in the water company. So what's happened is they've constructed them, and before we take them on, we undertake what's called a CCTV, which is like a little camera popping up the sewer to check that actually they've constructed it properly. And we will lift the manhole covers and have a look down the chambers to make sure they've constructed it properly. Also, we're looking for them to provide us drawings of how they have built those. So we're working with the consortium of developers out there to progress their sewers that they've constructed to South West Water to adopt. Now, we are currently meeting with those consortium of developers every other week now to progress the sewers out there to get them to adoptable standard. There has been some challenges with the developers getting them to the table to move these adoptions forward, but they are now meeting with us every other week. Now, they have offered in Cranbrook their foul and the surface water for adoption. The SUDS installations have not been offered to South West Water for adoption, and from our understanding are being maintained by the Town Council. I know the Town Council are also engaging with us on the adoption of the sewers and progress out there. So there is a lot of work that's being done out there. We are on site constantly inspecting what they're constructing as well. So we are working with the developers to achieve adoption of the sewers out there. The water mains, South West Water have installed, and so are our assets from the start. So we are looking after those from day one. We are aware of the growth of Cranbrook to the opposite side of the road. I will call it the Rockbere side. And this is something that our modelling team are currently looking at to make sure when that comes to connect, that there will be no detriment to our network further down the system, and looking at any upgrades that are needed to be done. Next slide, please. I'm going to pass you over to David.
So just so we pass down the screen. So yeah, just so hopefully that gives you a bit of a background in terms of sort of what we do almost tactically around some of the development. What David's now going to talk about is our more strategic approach to the development need and what we know as supply and demand.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, all. Some of you may have heard of the drainage and wastewater management plans. So water companies have been doing wastewater planning for decades and decades. But this is a new duty in the sense that the DWMPs are a long-term future risk view of drainage and wastewater issues. It goes out to 2050, so it brings into play that long-term planning that we were talking about before. What's also new about DWMPs is it's done to a national framework. So historically, the different water companies around England and Wales have been doing their own wastewater plans. What we now have is a common framework. Number of reasons for this. That common framework gets all the water companies working to the same legislation, framework and guidance, but it also helps with the other risk management agencies that also work in the drainage and flooding arena. So they all know what our plans are as well. And this becomes very important for DWMPs, because DWMPs are a significant step up in terms of what everyone has been doing. So step up in terms of reduction of spills to the environment, step up in terms of minimizing flooding, step up in terms of minimizing pollutions. And they're very ambitious goals here. And it requires us to do things differently than historically we have been doing them. And we're going to have to learn to be a lot more collaborative with other risk management agencies, with councils like yourself, and we're going to be needing your help to look at how we can meet all these challenges. Now, I guess where the rubber hits the road, there's four boxes there you can see on that screen. I mentioned before about preventing pollution incidences, reducing sewer flooding, protecting the bathing and shellfish coastal waters, and ensuring sewer resilience in terms of extreme conditions. So these long-term visions take into consideration climate change. They look at population growth. They look at urban development. They look at all these future risks and how they will impact the assets going forward. And as I said, very ambitious. We're looking at spending over the next 25 years out to 2050, £8.5 billion on this plan alone. So it is a very significant investment. Can we move to the next slide, please? The way we've constructed the DWMPs is we've done them at different levels. So across the southwest region, you will see on the screen there 22 red dots. We call those level 2 plans. Within the level 2, there are level 3 plans, which basically run down to like river basement catchment plans. And those level 3 river-based catchment plans, of which there's about 653 in the southwest region, are all aligned with the river basin. So once again, we get this collaboration with people like Devon Wildlife Trust, Cornwall Wildlife Trust, so all these other agencies that are involved in this. These plans are on our website. There's a number of different versions of these plans. It's the same plan, but what we've got is a technical plan, a regional plan, and a customer-friendly plan, which is an easy-to-read summary of the technical plans. Can you move on to the next slide, please? What I'm just showing here is that as part of the DWMP, we've been doing a lot of engagement. We've been talking to all the councils, parish councils, all our different stakeholders, and getting their feedback. We put out a draft plan back in July, and it's now open for consultation. And in fact, the consultation has just recently closed. And what I'm about to show you now is just take you through some of the feedback that we've got back from the community, from the public, and also from the stakeholders. There's a big desire for urgent improvements to move quickly. We have talked about green-based solutions. We have to balance this. If we want quick solutions, that will tend to move us more towards the engineered solutions, because the green solutions are new. Green solutions require more collaboration, so they will take a little bit longer in gestation in terms of delivering them. We've got a need to discuss and collaborate with many landowners how we can improve the drainage situation. This is a problem. If we can eliminate the problem from having existing in the first place, we go to upstream thinking solutions or interventions. We want to try and reduce the amount of surface water runoff upstream. We again get into things like SUDS. We want to look at water reuse, how we can reuse more water within these catchments. Do you want to move to the next slide, please? Some of the feedback on how we do this. There's a strong agreement that there's a step change in investment required, and that's what that £8.5 billion is flagging over the next 25 years out to 2050. In terms of the feedback, we've got quite a lot of agreement that we need to do this, even though there will be a significant bill impact. But there's a lot of support for cleaning up the environment and for getting these things done sooner rather than later. Next slide, please. And I think this is my last slide. Stakeholders have a view that not all costs should be borne by the water companies. And so this is where we will need to collaborate with other risk management agencies, but also the government. We want to run some education programs in the public in terms of better reuse of both potable water, but also better reuse of wastewater. And that's going to require a lot of education. As I said, these plans are very ambitious, and we need to change the way we do what we've been traditionally doing. And then that last point there is the stakeholders express views of where the funding should come from. They do believe that the government should step up and lend more assistance in this area. So that's some of the feedback that we've been getting from these DWMPs. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. So I guess just one final slide I should get Alison to run through, but just really in terms of, and I think hopefully then open up to questions, and then how we can work closer together going forward, which is obviously I think everybody's aspiration from this. So I'll just let Alison finish this last in terms of how we would like to work with East Devon and how you perhaps could help us.
So one of the big things at the moment is water efficiency, and I've put a link there in the slide to our water efficiency page on our website. We're really keen to engage with you and developers to look at them installing water efficient products, looking at simple ways that they can recycle water, be it as simple as a water butt being installed on the new development, and just finding ways that they can use water more wisely than people are doing it now. I mean, it's probably linked to David's point. It's an education, it's a change of people's thinking of how they do it. And we really want to look for your help and support to work with developers to encourage them to look to use water more wisely on their sites and encourage their future households, people that are buying the properties, to do that. We also are looking for support from yourselves to look at surface water discharges. As we've mentioned previously, we're really keen to make sure the surface water goes back to the ground or to the river. We don't want it going to our combined network, and we really want to engage with yourselves and the legal local flood authorities to emphasise the importance of finding alternative solutions for this surface water to go to, as opposed to going to our combined network. Our other request is, obviously, if we do need a time condition for development, that we will have some support from you to assist us in that matter. We appreciate we are not statutory consultees, but we want to cause no detriment to our existing customer network. So we will on occasions be looking for planning conditions, and we would look to you to help support us in that, to make sure that the likes of you and I as customers aren't impacted by the development that's happening out there. And the last but not least is, how can we engage with you more effectively in the future? And it's more of a question than an ask from us at the moment.
So I think that concludes our presentation. Thank you for bearing with us through the technology. We thought we had the Zoom technology sorted. We're actually a Microsoft Teams organisation, so we're very used to that technology, not perhaps quite so used to the Zoom technology. So apologise for that. Thank you to Sue for stepping in and sharing the slides for us. I'll hand back to you. See, there's lots of hands, so clearly lots of interest.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. Thank you to your team as well. You've put a good presentation together there. And again, thank you to Sue for getting the technology working. I'd like to invite questions now from members of scrutiny initially, followed by council members, and then any questions from members of the public if we have any. We are very limited on time, so please can we make the best use of this time by asking succinct questions, please. This is not time for debating, this is time for questions. So let's have a look. Councillor Rylance, please.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's a pretty succinct question. Thank you for mentioning the water butts. A few months ago, you had a great giveaway of water butts, and I know that a lot of people have not received their water butt yet. So I'm just wondering, where are the water butts? Because it's winter and it's raining. Thank you.
Okay, so I can answer that. It's not specifically something we're necessarily covering because it's a wider business initiative. I think the reality was getting hold of the water butts was a challenge. So we were, as you can probably imagine, we had a fantastic take up on the water butt offer, and therefore getting hold of those water butts from the suppliers was a challenge to us. So they are on order, and as soon as we possibly get them, they will be forwarded on. But it was a supply and demand issue within the suppliers in terms of where we were. And we are as keen as you are to get those into people's hands as quickly as you possibly can in terms of helping them to save water over the winter.
Brilliant, thank you. Councillor Davey, please.
Thank you, Chair. Caught me out there. There seemed to be a few hands up before mine. Yeah, it was a quick question about the infrastructure charge that's paid by the developer. You said it was a standard charge, and I'm just, does that mean it's a standard charge but relative to the size of the development, or it's just a fixed charge? So I'm just wondering how much money South West Water gets and if it's relative to the size of the development. Thank you.
So it is a fixed charge per property. So we charge clean, it's roughly £100 per property, and waste, it's circa £700 per property. But it's to answer your question, it's a per property charge.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Chapman, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, treatment works. Exmouth, as you know, the pipe work is very, very old. When you look at future developments being put forward to planning, there's an awful lot of properties there. Now, we don't like the overspill into the sea and the rivers, obviously. But surely there comes a point where your systems can no longer take developments, and therefore we're going to need more sewage plants around. Have you got any in the pipeline? Because I honestly don't think after Goodmore's Farm, Exmouth can take much more. And I don't think it should be sent around the county in containers to different treatment plants, which seems to indicate to me that is what South West Water needs, more treatment plants where there's going to be an upsurge in development like Cranbrook and things like that, rather than put the sewage into old drainage. Thank you.
So I think there are two elements to that question. So I think the first element around the actual foul drainage itself. So as I think we've explained, we go through a process of analysing and assessing the impact on both sewers and water treatment works as part of our assessment of development needs. And we will, as appropriate, update and upgrade those plants or those sewage networks accordingly. So we are able to add additional treatment capacity into existing sites, and we do that. In terms of specific to Exmouth, in terms of a relation to a new plant, I'm not aware of anything that we've currently got in the plan to do that. But obviously, as I say, we would have to keep a close eye on that with regards to existing arrangements that we currently have in place in those existing plans to be able to deal with the flows that are coming forward, but not only now, but also in the future. So as I said earlier on, we would always build into future capacity in terms of any of our projects. So it won't be a case of, for argument's sake, putting capacity in to deal with today's flows. It'll be, several years in advance, so we can make sure we give ourselves some headroom. I think the point you brought up with regards to moving things around in tankers. So we don't move sewage around in tankers, but what we do as part of the sewage treatment process, there is a sludge byproduct that comes out of that process. So that is what we move around, and we move that around in order to help us to deal with it in a more effective way. So we will have sludge treatment centres, and those sludge treatment centres will allow us to process that sludge effectively. We try to make energy from it wherever we possibly can. So if we can get energy from that product, we will do so, obviously helping both our operating costs, because if we can use the energy on site, that's fantastic. If we can export it back to the grid, similarly, that's a benefit to us. So what you see in respect of us tankering around isn't sewage. It's the sludge byproduct of sewage treatment, which we take to specific centres so that we can use it most effectively.
Brilliant, thank you. I can see no hands raised from members of committee, so we'll go outside the committee now. Councillor Faithful, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think mine is actually a question for Ed Freeman, because you said it's not, developers don't have to use South West Water, and you can't go onto the site to check, but building control can, but they can also have their alternative to East Devon Building Control. Is that right, Ed? Or if that is the case, is there any other way of checking what's going on sites?
Yes, through you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, our building control service are one option open to developers to deliver a building control service to their sites. They can use approved inspectors, and many of the large major house builders do that because they have national arrangements with them. So quite often on the large housing sites, we're not engaged in that. So wouldn't be involved in inspecting the sewage arrangements or the freshwater arrangements. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Ed.
Can I just come back? And is there an alternative to check the contractors?
Well, we remain the enforcement body for building regulations. So if we have reason to believe that it's not been constructed in accordance with the regulations, then we have the power to go on and inspect. But we would have to have reason to believe that the works that have been done are in breach of the regulations, which often if we're not involved in inspecting the site, we would have, it's very difficult to pick those things up, obviously.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor de Saron, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I note that obviously South West Water is not a statutory entity, and in the talk it gave us, you said that you could process about 27,000 applications. Could you tell us how many of those were maybe larger dwellings than a dwelling, and how many of them had any issue or problem that were reported back? Because I think that is the key as to how much customers were satisfied in the end, based on the number of developments. Because as Councillor Chapman has touched on, there are concerns in certain large developments, and I just wonder, of the 27,000, how many have given you rise for concern in queries that you've? Thank you very much.
So the 27,000 figure that I gave you, that includes, as I said, everything from 100 house development to extensions to goalposts in the local park going up. We obviously have a number. Our main concern initially at planning is always if there is a public asset that's going to be affected by their proposal, because what we don't want is them to start digging on the ground and go through a water main or a sewer. So that's our main concern. We didn't write on 27,000, but that is how many we reviewed. Of that, obviously, it's a smaller figure that I can't get to hand right now, but I can pass it on if it's of interest to you. We've written on all of those, and oh, there you go. Sorry, I've just been told it's about 2,000. So thank you for remembering. So we've written on about 2,000 of those within that time period, and as I said, first time is always if there's assets in the ground. If it is over 10 dwellings proposed, that's the kind of threshold where we run it through the supply and demand tool. We haven't had anything majorly flag up on those ones that we run on the tool that our network couldn't cope with them.
And I think maybe just to add a little bit more flavour to that in terms of how we try to protect it. So I think I mentioned earlier on is that we hold what we term as our key account relationships with the larger developer companies. So irrespective of the planning process, we liaise with them at least quarterly, so we can get a grip of what they've got coming forward, both from the long term and also in terms of the short term. So we deal with it sort of tactical issues, but also around the more strategic things, so that we get early sight of those things and try and work with the developers almost to find solutions before they come to your stage. In terms of resolving those things early.
Thank you very much. Councillor Miller, you've been sat there patiently. Over to you, sir.
Well, yeah, firstly, thank you, Chair, and to Sue and Sarah for keeping the show on the road this morning, given the technical difficulties. I'd like to speak in my capacity as a local ward councillor and as such a statutory consultee on planning applications. There's been a growing undercurrent of unrest within my community of Exmouth that South West Water do not routinely appear to monitor comments on planning applications, including minor ones. And before I ask these questions, I just wanted to thank South West Water for the detail in their presentation today and the personnel that gave it. Number one, what is South West Water's internal policy on assessing? Sorry, I'll ask my second question and come back to that. What staffing resource is currently devoted to commenting on planning applications, and would they assess the potential merits of increasing this? And does South West Water believe it should be a statutory consultee on planning applications? And is there a wider view in the water industry to support that idea? Thank you.
Oh, yes, sorry. I can answer that with regards to resources. So my team, there's roughly about 12 people currently reviewing planning applications. They do that as their full job. So that is what they're doing in relation to reviewing them. We review anything, as I said, that affects our assets in the ground and anything within the easements that we need to protect our existing assets.
I think in terms of your third question, in terms of should we be a statutory consultee, I think the answer to that question is we'd love to be. And I think, across the industry, we would love to be. As I think we expressed just now, in terms of the presentation, we are defined by certain regulations and certain legislation that we need to work within. But, similarly, to be a statutory consultee, I think would be a benefit. What I would say going forward is obviously we've got relatively good relationships with all the planning authorities, but they can always be improved. And part of this process, hopefully, is around trying to further strengthen, regardless of the statutory consultee status, but the view where we can share our challenges going forward together, so we can hopefully work a lot closer together in the future.
Can I come back briefly? No time, no problem.
Yes, carry on.
Yeah. So, on that basis, can you tell me what's going on in the water industry in terms of it trying to influence government? Do we have? Sorry, South West Water mute feedback through here. Can someone mute South? I'm receiving feedback. Sorry. Yeah. So, what's going on in terms of lobbying MPs and ministers on this? In the sense that I would have thought that our local MPs would all be supportive of South West Water being a statutory consultee, and it seems to be a stumbling block there that they're not in terms of influencing individual planning applications, both minor and major. I would also, I'd also like more of an answer in terms of the resource, because I just feel as though very few applications are being commented upon with any detail, and people in the community in Exmouth are commenting on that fact, and I feel that there should be more investment in assessing those applications and commenting on them. But going back to my main point, I'd like to know in more detail, if possible, if you know, the kind of work that's going in to try to make yourselves a statutory consultee, because I think that's such a key issue. Thank you.
So I can't say specifically in terms of the statutory consultee piece. What I can say is certainly respect of all of the challenges that we face, whether it be around environmental protection, around water resources. There is lots of work that goes on at national level, in terms of working with the government and other statutory organisations. Because we all want the same thing, and therefore we're all working towards that common goal. So there is a lot of work that goes on at that level. There's been discussions that have been going on with regards to the right to connect, for example, around whether that right to connect is right, and that was subject to a government discussion, which actually our own CEO was involved in. So we play a proactive role in that within the water industry, and we continue to engage both with our MPs. And also at national level. So yes, there's an awful lot going on, specifically in terms of the statutory consultee piece. Probably I can't give you that answer. I don't have that specifically to hand. But as I say, what I do know is, as an organisation, we do an awful lot in terms of working both nationally and locally around some of the key issues.
Thank you. I hope that helps. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, me again. It's just a follow-up actually to the question that Councillor Chapman asked, because you've got 5 Exmouth councillors on this call, so you're going to get quite a few Exmouth questions. You said that the convoys, as they're termed around here, that are coming to Exmouth are bringing sludge, not sewage. Quite frankly, that's not of much comfort to the people who live along the routes that those lorries are taking. And I can understand that Exmouth, being the largest town in East Devon, is going to have a good large treatment works, at least we would hope so. But to bring in sludge from other areas seems a bit unnecessary. And as a Green, I don't like the idea of convoying things around the area that could go shorter distances. So really, and the Exmouth treatment plant, although I'm sure it's a good plant, is along a narrow lane. So it's pretty obvious you need more treatment plants. And so my question is, do you have any plans for further treatment plants so that people in Exmouth can look forward to fewer lorries having to bring sludge to Exmouth for treatment.
So I think, as I said just now, there is a difference between a wastewater treatment work that deals with your sewage and a sludge treatment centre which deals with the sludge. And we have strategic sludge treatment centres located around our region. And that's why we end up having to move things around to make optimum use of those facilities, and also to make sure that we can gain the biggest benefit from that sludge. In terms of our immediate plans around Exmouth, I'm not aware of any, as I said earlier. What I would say is that what we know is is very those things in terms of so supporting some of those green credentials. I understand where you're coming from with regards to transport and transport impact of that. So we do have some new focus within the business on that, and I believe they're going through a process in terms of whether the current strategy that we're operating under is the right one, or whether that needs either tweaking or amending going forward. But I couldn't give you the details specifically on that at this moment. Apologies. I'm happy to get somebody to come back and talk about that if that was of interest.
Lovely, thank you. I can see no further hands raised. So unless anybody's going to jump in quickly, no. Great. Can I just thank Mr. Lake and his team again for attending this briefing today and for the presentation. And that brings our meeting to an end. So again, thanks to everybody, including members of the public who have online. Can I just remind all the present until the supporting officer will confirm when the recording is going live. Until then, your comment live.